blah, 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 right? So you have sort of like a tier-based, rung-based society. Right? The whole point of introducing inequalities is to construct hierarchic society. The alternatives of the left should consist of locating itself fully in the field of democratic revolution and expanding the change of equivalence between the different struggles against oppression. The different struggles against oppression, right? So you'll often hear within the Occupy Wall Street movement that one of the struggles might be the foreclosure crisis. Another struggle might be student loan crisis. Another struggle might be the algorithmic trading of the stock market, the gambling on people's pension. There's many different struggles. But what the authors are saying is that the left should consist of locating itself fully in the field of democratic revolution and expanding the chains of equivalence between the different struggles against oppression. The task of the left, therefore, cannot be to renounce liberal democratic ideology, but on the contrary, to deepen, here's the key point, right? To deepen and expand it in the direction of a radical and actual democracy. Right? So the idea is the response, right? And I'm not necessarily saying that I believe that this response fits prima facie to a 2011 example of Occupy Wall Street, but I know that there are many debates as to who's at the heart of this analysis. Who really is at the heart of the problem? Where do we really lay the blame? Is it to be the case that all the blame goes to the bankers in Wall Street? Well, the first section of the video demonstrated that that's fallacious. Scientists, though I'm not knocking it, have indirectly contributed to some of the problem, right? So the question is, what is the response from the left, right? The response for the left, according to the authors, has to be to deepen and expand it, right? This revolution against hierarchic society has to expand it in the direction of a radical and actual democracy. Therefore, the meaning of liberal discourse on individual rights is not definitively fixed. So in layman's terms, what in the world does that mean? It means, in the face, this is my attempt to sort of solidify this, in the face of an attempt to socially reconstruct inequalities, the left needs to be more left, more liberal, more centrist, right? And everything that comes along with that idea, right? Meaning, to be technical now, larger sort of institutional control, right? Big government. I mean, this is a gross generalization of the left, but left in sort of this cliche, right versus left. Right is small government, left is big government. Right is pro-capital. Left's also pro-capital, but more sort of social services, right? So really left, big government, big social service programs, you get the idea. Now, given the fact that, and I acknowledge this, right? Given the fact that we are currently within a very entrenched economic crisis, the argument from the right would obviously be, now is not the time to increase our expenditure. This doesn't really make sense. We need to be conservative, right? And not look to increase our expenses, but we need to control the expenses we have now by balancing the budget, by austerity programs, and A lot of this argument is currently going on in Europe, with Italy, with Greece, and so on, right? I'm not here to necessarily take a position. What I'm doing is sort of structurally situating the argument in a 21st century assessment of the Occupy Wall Street movement. So, synthesis 1. A leftist alternative to liberal conservatism, which is seeking to reconstruct, according to the authors, hierarchic society through the introduction of inequalities. Hierarchical society must be to further embrace liberal democratic ideology, far left, rather than embracing a more centrist position. And here's what's important for Occupy Wall Street. The Occupy Wall Street, though, is neither left nor right. Right? The Occupy Wall Street is neither a leftist movement nor a conservative movement. And so, making sense of Occupy Wall Street in terms of left and right isn't going to be as clearly cut as all that, right? So the Occupy movement though neither left nor right, must recognize that there are attempts to reconstruct hierarchic society. Click the link and you can watch the Kosh video that I was telling you about, 402, Neighborhood Schools, as an example. Insofar as Occupy Wall Street movement is a movement against oppression, right, and a struggle against oppression and structural violence, and I'll explain that in a second, recognition, and I actually should put a link to there, structural violence, recognition and voice must be given to the varied systems of oppression. Occupy Wall Street is a struggle against inequality, right? My point in this contribution, which is now approaching my goal of 10 hours. I think I'm approaching 7 hours, and I feel, when I step away from the lecture series, that I will definitely have made a very, very serious contribution to the movement. That will be undeniable. The point is, I will have failed. I will have utterly failed if we don't recognize what exactly it is that we're fighting. Right? What is it that we're fighting in this movement? Right? What is the point of people getting together? Right? It can't just be that we're fighting the man, the 1%, people who have wealth, people who have affluence. That can't be the fight. That can't be the fight. It's too personalized in some sense when we're talking about the individual wealthy person. It's too abstract when we're talking about some very broad structure, global structure. It becomes conspiratorial. What we're fighting is the reintroduction of inequality, economic inequality, social inequality, cultural inequalities, inequalities of all kind, into the social nexus. We have progressed to a point in our society, to a point in our history, meaning the history of social evolution, where we've done away with a lot of these systems, these antiquated systems of segregation, these antiquated systems of ageism and racism and sexism. We've done away with a lot of these, right? Not wholeheartedly. I recognize that they are still prolific, but we are much more tolerant. And I know Zizek hates that term, tolerant, and I don't mean tolerant in sort of cliched sense. But we are a lot more tolerant of individuals now than we were before. And the attempt to reintroduce inequalities that would create a sense of disinterest or apathy for those who don't have, right? Well, I'm off, I'm affluent, I have everything, why should I care about them? The attempt to reintroduce justifications into the social nexus to legitimize, this is not me, the author says, I forget where it was, to legitimize, on page 16, number 3, legitimize inequality, right, is a problem. In the next 2 days, I'll be doing a presentation on apathy and the problem of apathy. I don't want to go into a huge discussion now, but that really is the dilemma, right? We need to recognize that individuals within society who are mobilized in this Occupy Wall Street movement, one, don't have a unified voice, but it's not that they don't have a unified voice that's at stake. The reason why Occupy Wall Street, right, Occupy Wall Street, has so many voices, right, and now we can really see it in a more Foucauldian sense. Think of this as a micro, this is a macro, so that this is a point on the social nexus, right? Occupy Wall Street, as emanating its power, is addressing an attempt to reintroduce inequality here, and inequality here, and inequality here. That there's so many inequalities, and that's why there's a representative voice for this inequality, there's a representative voice for this inequality, there's a and on and on and on, right? Occupy Wall Street needs to recognize that for it to transform into this next, if it is to transform and not just fizzle, if it is to transform into this next stage, this next phase of the Occupy Wall Street movement, what we need to do is to get regionally, right, within the United States of America at least, we need to get sort of regional representatives who represent particular voices battling inequality. I am going to be the regional director, blah, 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 if you wish, right, for the foreclosure crisis and for, our dependency on foreign oil and on and on and on and on, whatever the grievances might be, right? This way the movement has a point of reference, right? Oh, Bob in Maryland is the guy that you can go to talk about X, right? If you really